I didn't shout. I didn't threaten. I just slid a dusty deed across the table and walked to the dam my grandfather built in 1978. When those spillway gates opened, 35 luxury homes turned into unwanted lakefront property. That's how you end an HOA land grab, with gravity. My name's Jake Morrison, 34 years old, Army Corps of Engineers, and the third-generation caretaker of 47 acres just outside Austin, Texas. My grandfather, everyone called him Pops, bought this land in the 1950s when Austin was still more barbecue smoke than tech money. Pops was a builder, not of skyscrapers, but of things that lasted. Fences that held cattle, barns that stood against storms, and one little earthen dam built in 1978. That dam wasn't fancy. It was a simple structure designed to collect rainwater, water the cattle, and ease pressure on our neighbors during dry seasons. The Army Corps even helped design it for flood control. Pops told me often, "Jake, someday this back 40 will be worth more than oil. Not because of what's on it, but because of what flows through it." As a kid, I'd follow him down the gravel road, fishing in the stock pond, learning how to read the clouds for rain. Later, when I deployed overseas, I realized how right he was. In Afghanistan, I built wells and water systems for villages. Over there, water meant survival. Pops had already known that. When Pops passed while I was deployed, the property went into trust under my sister Sarah. She meant well, but she lived in California and didn't understand Texas land law. She let a management company handle the taxes, and that's where the trouble started. Because when you stop walking your land, someone else starts planning how to take it. I came home in August 2023. After years overseas, all I wanted was quiet. Mornings with strong coffee on the porch, evenings listening to cicadas, and maybe finally rebuilding the old barn roof. Instead, what I found stopped me cold. Down the gravel road, where Pop's pastures once rolled, stood 35 half-built McMansions, complete with tennis courts and golf carts. The sign read, Willowbrook Estates. At first, I thought I'd taken a wrong turn. But the closer I got, the angrier I became. Construction trucks rumbled across my land. Survey stakes cut across the pasture where Pops taught me to shoot my first rifle. Crews poured foundations where the creek should have been. I marched to the foreman, demanding answers. He smirked. "Sorry, buddy. This is HOA property now. Got permits and everything." I called the county sheriff. He shrugged, uncomfortable, and explained the HOA had filed something called adverse possession. Basically, if land sits unused and someone improves it long enough, they can claim ownership. My land wasn't abandoned, but my absence while deployed gave them the loophole they needed. Then came Maggie Thornwell. She didn't walk. She paraded up in a spotless white golf cart, tennis outfit pressed, smile dripping with condescension. "Your family left this land, soldier," she said sweetly, like she was offering me cookies instead of stealing my inheritance. "We're just putting it to good use for the community." Behind her words, I heard Pop's voice in my head. "Water, Jake. Never let anyone take your water." Because when I checked the dam that day, my stomach dropped. The creek feeding it was drying up. Their construction crews had diverted it. Pop's reservoir, 45 years of careful water management, was being drained to decorate McMansions. That's when I realized this wasn't just theft. It was war. Maggie Thornwell, 52 years old, president of the Willowbrook Estates HOA. She was the kind of woman who could smile at you while driving the knife in deeper. Always dressed in tennis skirts like they were a uniform. Always with perfume strong enough to mask the cigarette smoke clinging to her. She married City Councilman Rick Thornwell, whose influence kept her untouchable. Together, they ran this HOA like a suburban empire. Maggie had a reputation. She forced out anyone who didn't fit her cookie-cutter vision of community perfection. Didn't mow your lawn exactly right? Citation. Parked your truck outside the garage? Fine. Refused to repaint your shutters the approved beige? Court order. Now she had her eyes on Pop's land. And with Rick's zoning power, she turned agricultural acres into a residential paradise practically overnight. The city council meetings were greased with campaign donations. Permits were rushed through in weeks. And Maggie wasn't just taking land. She was taking water. Her crews dug trenches to reroute the creek feeding Pop's Dam, turning it into a trickle. That reservoir wasn't just my family's, it supplied neighbors downstream during drought. Maggie didn't care. Her pitch was simple: safety and community. She told reporters the dam was dangerous, that families downstream were at risk. The local paper quoted her crying about protecting children. But the truth was clear. She wanted that dam gone because it stood in the way of her empire. Standing there, listening to her syrupy voice, I clenched my fists. Maggie thought she was untouchable. She thought a veteran would just roll over, take the lowball offer, and disappear. She didn't know she'd just picked a fight with the wrong soldier. My first move was hiring a lawyer. I walked into his office with a folder full of photos and righteous fury. He barely looked up. Challenging zoning change? That'll be $85,000 just to get started. $85,000 just to argue that my land was mine. While I scrambled for answers, Maggie and Rick were busy tightening the noose. Rick pushed through a zoning modification, turning my acres from agricultural to residential in record time. One council meeting, one vote, and my cattle pasture became subdivision property. Meanwhile, Maggie plastered the local news with her narrative. The unstable veteran blocking community growth. Neighbors whispered. I even got a wellness check from Veteran Services, clearly orchestrated to paint me as unstable. On paper, I was losing. Every letter from the county felt heavier, every notice of violation, like another nail in the coffin. My sister Sarah called from California, begging me to walk away, take the HOA's offer, and move on. But I wasn't going anywhere. Because one thing I learned overseas, sometimes the only way to win isn't through lawyers. It's through digging deeper than your enemy ever expects. I spent days in dusty courthouse archives, combing through boxes no one had touched in decades. And then I struck gold. First was Pop's original 1978 dam permit, stamped and signed by the Army Corps of Engineers. This wasn't just some farm pond. It was part of a federally recognized flood control system. That meant federal jurisdiction. Maggie couldn't override it. Not the HOA, not the city council, not even the county. Then came the knockout punch, a 1923 water rights deed, buried in a folder of yellowed papers. My great-grandfather had purchased senior water rights to the entire Willow Creek. Older than the county. Older than every single one of Maggie's shiny houses. In Texas, water rights outrank everything, oil, minerals, even land deeds. And ours were ironclad. I sat in that courthouse basement, heart pounding, realizing the scope of what I'd found. They hadn't just stolen my land. They were stealing federally protected water. And with the right proof, the entire development could come crashing down. I copied every document, every stamp, every map. When I walked out into the hot Texas sun that afternoon, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Leverage. Maggie didn't waste time. She went nuclear. First came the news crews. She stood on her manicured lawn, dabbing fake tears while claiming Pop's Dam was a ticking time bomb. We just want our children safe, she cried, cameras eating it up. Then came the next door rumors. Posts warning of an aggressive veteran with dangerous tendencies. She never said my name, but she didn't have to. Everyone knew. The harassment escalated. Loud music complaints when I worked my land. Safety patrols parking near my gate, jotting down license plates. Citations for unsightly structures, meaning Pop's farmhouse that had stood for 60 years. Even animal control showed up, questioning my old cattle dog like he was a hazard. The final insult? A forced wellness check. A VA social worker knocked on my door, clipboard in hand, while Maggie sat in her golf cart across the road, watching like a queen inspecting her troops. They weren't just trying to steal my land. They were trying to bury me under paper, rumors, and shame. But I'd seen worse tactics in war zones. Bureaucracy is just another kind of weapon. And two can play that game. If Maggie thought intimidation would break me, she miscalculated. I started fighting smart. First call was to my old Army buddy, Tony Riggs, now with the EPA Enforcement Division. In 20 minutes, he taught me more about environmental law than my lawyer did in 3 hours. If they're diverting water without federal permits, he said, that's a Clean Water Act violation. Big fines. criminal even. Second, I met Amanda Cross, an environmental lawyer who took one look at Pop's water deed and smiled. Jake, this isn't just a property fight. This is federal. She agreed to work pro bono if I helped her build a case strong enough to crush them. Then I rallied the neighbors. Mrs. Chun, whose family garden had withered since the creek dried. Miguel Santos, a farmer whose fields had relied on Willow Creek for generations. Each had a story. Each had evidence. We set up trail cameras, gathered photos of the diversions, measured flow rates. Amanda filed federal complaints. Tony guided me through documenting every violation. Piece by piece, Maggie's empire started to look less like a community dream and more like a criminal enterprise. I wasn't alone anymore. I had allies. And together, we weren't just fighting back. We were building a case that could sink them. While Maggie scrambled to finish houses, I studied Pop's dam like a soldier planning a mission. The emergency spillway gates, unused since 1982, still worked. I tested the hydraulics, checked flow channels, ran calculations. Pops had built them strong, and the Army Corps had designed them for exactly this. Controlled releases to restore natural flow. I calculated the volume needed. 2.8 million gallons to refill Willow Creek. The reservoir held 3.1 million. Perfect. If I opened the gates at the right time, under the right conditions, with federal witnesses watching, it wouldn't be flooding. It would be legal restoration. But timing mattered. Rainstorms were coming. Maggie's crews were rushing to cement over the original creek bed. Once blocked, the water would never flow naturally again. The window was closing, and I knew what I had to do. Word spread fast. I was planning a demonstration. Maggie turned it into her battlefield. She staged a protest at my property line. 20 HOA members with folding chairs, protect our kids signs, and live streams painting me as a terrorist. She even hired private security, tactical vests, radios, the whole wannabe military package. Her media blitz was relentless. Morning shows featured her trembling voice. This veteran learned to weaponize water overseas. Now he's threatening to wash away children's homes. Her husband Rick testified as a city engineer, warning of catastrophic dam failure. Omitted, of course, was the fact the dam had passed inspection every year. But I wasn't fighting alone. Miguel rallied farmers to counter-protest. Mrs. Chun brought old photographs of her thriving garden before the creek dried. Environmental groups showed up, cameras in hand, ready to witness history. Even the local diner owner brought coffee for supporters, declaring, "This land was always for farming, not McMansions." Tensions peaked when my trail cameras caught Maggie's hired security sabotaging the spillway, pouring quickset concrete into the channels. I spent all night with a jackhammer clearing it, fury burning hotter than the Texas sun. At dawn, with storm clouds rolling in and federal inspectors en route, I knew the hour had come. This wasn't just a fight over land anymore. This was war over truth. At 7:02 a.m., with EPA agents watching and cameras rolling, I pulled the lever. The gates groaned. Then came the sound I'll never forget, the roar of water finally freed, rushing into the dry creek bed where it belonged. It wasn't destruction. It was restoration. The creek carved its way back, filling channels Pops had walked me through as a kid. Farmers knelt by the banks, scooping clear water in their hands, tears streaming down their faces. Mrs. Chen's irrigation lines filled for the first time in 18 months. Maggie screamed. She pointed at me, shrieking for federal agents to arrest the terrorist. But the water never touched her precious homes. It stayed in the creek's natural path, exactly as designed. On live TV, her narrative collapsed. Because what everyone saw wasn't chaos. It was justice. The fallout was swift. EPA inspectors documented everything. Their report confirmed the HOA diverted waterways illegally, destroyed habitats, and lied on insurance applications. Banks froze the HOA's construction loans. Insurance companies canceled policies. Rick's cozy zoning changes unraveled under investigation. Then came the arrests. Maggie's hired security caught sabotaging federal infrastructure. Rick indicted for fraud and corruption. Maggie herself staring down millions in fines and lawsuits. Overnight, Willowbrook Estates went from luxury dream to financial nightmare. Half-built houses stood abandoned, foundations cracking under sun and rain. And me? I wasn't painted as a terrorist anymore. The news headline read, "Veteran restores stolen creek, community rallies." The truth had flowed as naturally as the water. Weeks later, the land looked alive again. The creek sparkled. Fish returned. Birdsong filled the mornings. Miguel's farm thrived with fresh irrigation. Mrs. Chen's garden bloomed brighter than ever. Neighbors gathered to celebrate with food, music, and laughter by the restored creek. For me, it wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about legacy. Pop's dam hadn't just survived. It had saved the community once again. I poured a jar of creek water over his grave and whispered, "It's flowing again, Pops. Just like you said." That's how I beat an HOA that stole my land, by letting the water tell the truth. Now, I want to hear from you. Drop your HOA nightmare stories in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. Because next week, I'm telling you about the city that tried to steal my neighbor's solar farm.